grab your popcorn, kick back and relax, because it's time for some more Carnage. So, have you ever watched someone that's VP pushing or really high on the VP leaderboards and wondered, like, how they look doing, like, some of these crazy attacks that they do? How do they make that look so easy? Well, a large part of why they make it look as easy as they do is because of how they distract things like the shock launchers and the rockets. Now, that is the exact topic of this video, and we're going to be taking an in-depth look on how to actually do it just as well as what they do. So, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and let's jump into it. Okay, so now let's look at our first example. So we're going to start off with something pretty easy when it comes to critter timing. We're going to look at how to time critters perfectly when they're coming out of smoke. Now, the very first thing you guys need to know is how buildings see critters. So, a critter becomes visible like this. So if I was to place a critter box down, when it sort of hits down, and then you see that little animation where all the critters sort of come out of the box and then they land on the ground. The moment they land on the ground is actually when they become visible to buildings. So to time a critter box perfectly, it's how far they have to go and then that little animation. So even though our troops are positioned in certain spots in these examples, as long as the critters are actually closer to the defenses than where our troops are, our troop positions don't really matter. So I want to make that perfectly clear before we jump into these examples. I don't want you guys to be focusing really on how many smokes I'm using or how good my walk was or anything like that. The purpose of these examples is literally just my critter timing. So this first critter box is going to be around, I'm going to put this in half times, around this wood storage here. So I will press away. So I'm going to be placing it around that wood storage, and if we zoom out of this base here, that is roughly a third of the way down the base. So that is about the distance that this critter box is going to be being thrown for a distraction. And you're going to see on the smoke timer that it is roughly about 10 o'clock. I will pause it on screen so you guys can see it, just so it's visible for you guys. But it is going to be about 10 o'clock when that press happens, and I will try to pause it anyway, just on the gameplay. So you guys just seen that. So it is about 10 o'clock right now on the timer, and we will go back to halftime so we can see just how close it was. Bam, there it is. So you guys can see how much is left on the smoke, and those critters just touched down on the ground, and you guys can see now everything turns around, targets those critters, and our troops receive pretty much no damage whatsoever, and I didn't shock a single thing. Now you guys can see just how well that was timed. So that was timing something for roughly close to the front of the base. Let's see if we can go to the back of the base. So we'll go 4 times. So in this particular example, we're on a snow base, and we're going to be placing it behind, just under this sniper tower, but above the cannon. So because it's a snow base and where I pressed it, it's almost impossible. Well, I'm not going to say almost impossible, it is impossible to see the press. So I am going to go to the gunboat, and I'm going to show you guys the exact moment of the press there, and we're going to do it that way. So this far into the base, it's roughly about 9:30. That's sort of like the safe margin to be pressing. You can probably go about 10 o'clock if you really tried to push it, but about 9:30 is roughly where you want to be at. And then when you're at the really back end, then it's like roughly closer to 9 o'clock, if that makes sense. So we're going to go to 2 times. We're going to get the timer up a little bit so you guys don't have to wait too much. And now we're going to be going to the gunboat here. And now we're just going to go on and off pressing. There we go. So you can see that little explosion. this is the exact moment of the press, which I'm really glad I got. So you can see one timer is at exactly 9 o'clock, and the other one is just the tiniest little bit over that. So we're going to say about 9 o'clock right now is the time that the press happened. So let's go back to half times and let's see exactly how close this was to being perfect. So they just touched down. I think I didn't unpause it at the exact right moment, but you can see just how well that was timed. Now let's see if they do distract the buildings. So you can see that the rockets, we did lose the delay on those rockets, and those critters still did distract all of that perfectly. So before, when I said the top end was 9 o'clock, I was probably wrong on that. It was probably closer more to like 8:30. So there's that. So that is how you distract everything as you come out of smoke perfectly. So now let's move on to our next topic. Okay, so for our next topic, we're going to be looking at how our troops walk up the base. So when our troops walk up the base, we want to be able to distract buildings like whatever it is, like a rocket launcher, a mortar, a shock launcher, whatever it is, we want to be able to distract them. So the important thing to note here is, and I've got a pretty easy example to show you guys with just the HQ and sort of like a shock launcher in the middle of the base. Okay, so here's the critter box. It was just pressed. It was probably like half a second before that. The reason why I had to show it this way instead of my usual pause method is actually because I pressed on the top left corner of the HQ, and for whatever reason, those presses just seem not to be visible on screen. So it was literally the middle of the tile, like under this little grassy patch where the Cryoneer is. It was like just a smidgen before that. So if we bring up the range of our shock launcher here, that is actually about 4.5 tiles. And the reason why I'm saying 4.5 tiles is because I tried my best on the exact moment to measure it, and 4.5 looked about right. So 4.5 tiles is the exact perfect moment. And I want to show you guys just how perfect this is, and I'm going to show another example which is actually a fail after this, and just so you guys can see how perfect it is. So the critters launch, they land. Right, here they are. So you can see the shadow of my Cryoneer. It's in the white glowy bit of the shock launcher. Now you guys are going to see that the shock launcher actually targets the critters. Now most people don't know this, and the people that are still watching at this point are going to get some exclusive information not everyone knows. So most people think that the range of a building is actually the very outer rim of that white glowy bit. It actually isn't. A lot of buildings will actually use like the bit like before the white glowy bit. So you guys can see that if you look at the shadow of my Cryoneer here, which is the shadow is actually the part that registers as where it's in range of and what isn't. Or well, in the case of small troops it is anyway. You guys will see that it's still in the white glowy bit. And now look at this. See, like, look at that. The shock launcher, bam, fires at the critters, and that 4.5 my troops being 4.5 tiles away from the range of the shock launcher happened to be the perfect timing of it. Now you guys probably seen that it took me a lot of tries to get this perfect. Every attempt that I did was so close, but it wasn't perfect, and I wanted to show you guys the very outer limits of being perfect. So that was perfect timing. Now I want to show you guys just how close you can be to being perfect and then be fail. So in this particular example, I think I was closer to being like 4 tiles away. Let's bring up the range of the shock launcher, bring it to half times. So I think I shocked about here. Yeah, I did. So like, I got just a smidgen too close, and I want to show you guys just how close it was. So you guys can see like that Cryoneer was just walking into the range of the shock launcher beyond that white glowy bit. And look at that, the shock launcher fired at where the Cryoneer actually was as he was walking, and I didn't distract it properly. Unfortunately, I was a bit late. So you guys can see that white glowy bit is like the very outer edge of what you can do. So when the shock launcher is like halfway into the base like that, 4.5 tiles is like seriously pushing your luck, as you guys just seen. 5 tiles is normally what people go for because it's a bit safer and it's a bit more guaranteed. And normally you don't have the gold to be messing around trying to get it exactly perfect. And then like 5.5 tiles is like playing it cautious. So that's usually the range for like halfway. If, for example, I did, I'm trying to think here. If I did like like my HQ here, and let's just move that out the way. Anywhere where it will actually go, please. And I place my shock launcher about here. Assuming that all this other stuff wasn't in the way, like the rocket. If I was to walk diagonally to this shock launcher, because it's so close to the beach, 2.5 tiles would probably be dead on perfect. 3 tiles would probably be safe. Sort of like the cautious area where you can be safe if my troops were walking in. Let's just go back to the norm. I'll go back to like a shield layout that I used to use. So in this particular example, let's just move that out the way. So let's move my shock launcher here. So if my shock launcher was here, you guys can see that like 3 tiles would be cautious when it was on the beachfront. 5 tiles is cautious when it was like in the middle. So if it was this far away, it's probably going to be closer to the 7 tiles. Is probably going to be like the safe bet as you're walking in. Okay guys, so in the last examples, you guys seen just how far you could go over that white little glowy bit in the range of the shock launcher before you actually got triggered and, you know, before it started aiming and trying to kill you. Now I'm going to show you guys something else you may not have known. So we're going to 4 times this. So we're going to barrage out the rocket launcher, and I guess we're going to half times it now. So you notice I dropped Everspark a little bit late. The reason for that is because if you drop it at the same time as your troops, the critters, obviously, that spawns walk into the range of the shock launcher and sort of kill you. And that's the range of the shock launcher. So we're going to delay that. Now the part that you may not have known, let's look at where the riflemen go. So, whoa. I forgot, I unpressed it by accident. Right, so see how that rifleman, the shock launcher hasn't turned yet, but this one rifleman at the front, he's sort of aiming his gun, trying to shoot the cannon, and because his cannon sticks out as far as it does, it's actually over it's not over the range of that glowy bit yet, but at the moment he shoots, his pixel, there's like 1 pixel of his gun that like slightly peeks up and will go over the range of that that white little glowy bit of that shock launcher. So you'll see that the moment it shoots, and we'll zoom out a little bit, the shock launcher is going to turn and start aiming at them. Alright, so just shot a bullet, and bam, there we go. Look at that. He's now aiming at that. So, case in point here that I'm trying to make is the shooting animation of the rifleman does count as being over the range. It's not just the shadow on the bottom of the troop, which, to be honest, it should be. But yeah, that's the thing. So if you want to drop critters so that it distracts a shock launcher, say, before it's even, like, at the very first possible moment, you need to take that into account. So I was at just a half a second, a millisecond too late on that, because I didn't count on that being a thing. So now we're going to look at another example where I do take that into account, and I drop it a tad earlier. So, of course, barraging that again, deploying the same way, dropping Everspark a bit late. Now we're going to go into half times. and boom. So I just pressed it, and you can see just how far away even the first troops are. So there's that, I guess. So I'll sort of try to pause it when they deploy, and boom. So that's the range of the shock launch. So you can see nothing's quite got there yet. But look at this, there's going to be one rifleman on the far right that this decides to walk well over its range for no apparent reason. There we go. So you can see that was about half a second to a second later than what it needed to be. But with this stuff, you can't be too precise, you can't be too perfect, because as you guys just seen with the last example, I tried to get it perfect, and it almost cost me. So, I mean, it's up to you, but playing it safe like I did there is the best possible method. It's like, with my troop damage, it's just before the building starts getting shot at that I have to drop it. And I'm a full offense player versing a base with no ice. Now, if you're 7 ice, 7 boosted, that's the base you're facing, and you're a leaderboard player and you're on a boost, the building damage, your troop damage will be about the same as what I have now, but you're going to be facing more ice, so it's going to take a little bit longer to clear, and you're going to have to figure out that timing for yourself based on your own troop damage. So that's a part of prepping for a push. You use the offense that you're going to be using, and then you'll do a bit of practice and you'll figure out that timing for yourself. So that's a part of it. So now that we know roughly the timing for, while we're clearing a defense, not just walking, let's look at another replay. So the last replay here that I've got to show, I'll probably show an actual... I don't know if I'll show an actual attack of all this in play. I might. I'm not sure. We'll see. So, again, clearing like I was. So this time, instead of just dropping our troops, which, to be honest, is probably the method you were going to use normally, which was the previous method, I thought we'd group up and would see just how different this is. So, using roughly the same timing as before, I believe. Let's see if I did. When's the press mate? There we go. So, I did press it about the same time, but because there was more riflemen together from the start, I believe that's what the reason was, they sort of span out and go over the shock launcher's range just a little bit quicker, and we'll see the example of this. So they turned just before the critters launched, despite the fact it was the same timing. So, if you group up like I did, or you try to, you're probably going to have to, you're going to have to drop your critters a tad sooner. So, 4 times. So, we're going to be looking right now at what happens if you want to let a shock launcher fire at you, and then you want to distract it for its next shot. So, we've looked at pretty much every other scenario at this point, except for that. So, what we're going to do is the timing for this is basically just before the shock launcher aims at your troops and then decides it's going to load up the fire at you. So, it's easier to see this, like, pretty much like at the start, like as it turns, because that's the easiest way to see that timing. So, I'm going to half times this, and I'm going to show you guys. So, you guys will see the press on this cannon, and boom. So you just seen it. It was just as this first rifleman was walking into the range, and you'll see now, the shock launcher turns instantly, and look at how close the timing was. So the critters go down on the ground now, and then bang. So the critters have to launch just before the critter fires its bullet. Before the shock launcher fires its bullet. So in the heat of a battle, if a shock launcher is about to fire a bullet at you, and you know that, then you can drop a critter box, and that shock launcher will aim at you, it'll fire a second time, and then that critter box will drop, and it will distract it for its third shot. So in this case, you can see I dropped it just before I went into the range, which is too late to distract it the first time, as you guys are aware, but it was early enough that I can distract it for its second shot. Okay guys, so by this point we've pretty much covered everything there is to cover when it comes to distracting shock launchers, but the one thing we haven't really looked at yet is keeping a shock launcher distracted. So you can see we've dropped some critter boxes here. So now we're going to look at throwing critters like when they're all ready to sort of keep a building distracted, right? So there's a few elements to this. Firstly, how do you place the critters? So you can see we're placing them on the building so they spread around it. That'll give them a bit more survivability. If I was placing them between something like, say, this wood storage and the iron storage here, they would group up more and they would be more vulnerable to splash damage. So that's something to note. Secondly, how much building damage are we facing? A good example of this is like an operation map, right? Like if you're going to drop 2 batches of critters, do you drop the first one when your smoke is like 9 o'clock, and then another one as your smoke's clearing, because you'll only get about 3 seconds, because of just because of how much everything sort of will kill them. So that's a pretty good example. So that's an element, and probably the biggest is where are you placing it. So you can see where I'm placing it here. This machine gun is ripping into them. I've got a shock launcher, a rocket, and a mortar, and a couple of one-shot buildings as well. So you can see that there's a lot killing them right now. So I actually placed this first lot of critters. You can see there's a box coming in already too early. You can see they're about to hit, and you can see how much stuff is there. So this first batch was dropped too early. I could have dropped it like a second or two later. Sorry, I could have delayed it by a second or two more, because that rocket was currently still firing. But that's not too bad. So you can see at this point this machine gun's going to turn. So now there's a lot less pressure on my critters right now. And I just pressed it. I'm not sure if you guys recognize the press there, but I pressed it when there was about 3 or 4 critters left. So 2/3 of them were already dead, and boom, look at that. Look at how well that was timed. Exactly the right moment. There was only 1 critter left alive. The health on it doesn't really matter. It would have instant died to anything anyway, but you get the point. So this is something that, while I just showed you the timing for perfect in that particular scenario, was roughly when there was about 4 left on the battlefield, this is something you have to do by a case-by-case basis. It's one of the reasons why, like, you'll see a VP pusher like Master Morty or the PSC Life. PSC Life's a really good example. If you see his attacks, you'll see he tries multiple times. This isn't just to find the right strategy, it's also partly because some of them are GBE tests. So if I was to do a hit on a base, we'll just press attack on this one. I haven't actually looked, I don't really know what it is. But you'll see, like, he might barrage out a few buildings, he might drop some critters and say, oh, how long is that going to survive? Oh, so they died pretty much immediately. That's a bad spot to distract. So you get the point, right? So that pretty much covers that. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. Hopefully it's not too long. I think my overall footage right now is about 40 minutes, so I've really got to do some work on editing this. But hopefully I've managed to teach you guys something. This is a topic that I haven't seen anyone really cover yet, so hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you've learned something, and I'll see you guys in the next one.